Hi guys. All right. Well, just to get started, just a quick kind of show and tell. Maybe we'll start with you, Tom. If you could just share a little bit about your background and how you got into this field.
Let's see. I'm a writer by trade, so I'm working, TV and movies and stuff, and I've been always deeply fascinated in this subject. Had some early experiences that I'd quantify as ghost experiences primarily, but was deeply moved, profoundly moved by Whitley Strieber's Communion, as I'm sure many here were, in a way that made me think about our possible conversation tonight, because that image on that cover of that book seemed to really resonate with people and connect with people in a different way. So I remember taking my parents out to Valley Forge Park at about 10 at night at 15 years old with a notebook and a backpack. I wasn't that strange at 15. I mean, this was a plan I had. I just felt so connected to the book that I knew something was going to happen. Nothing did. But many decades later, I'm doing a podcast with Dave about this topic, so something happened in that regard. But I suppose now about 2 years ago, we've been friends for many years, and just briefly, my wife had been like, "Did you know that Dave? We hadn't talked in a minute, and he was like really into UFOs." And I just knew Dave as an atheist and a real sort of like scientific person. And even though I was fascinated about it, I was deeply curious what had gotten him so curious about it. We had dinner, and at that dinner, I went, "I've got to be having the conversations that you're having with really interesting people," and I was just fired up to talk about it. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Mm-hmm. All right, is it my turn?
Yes, sir.
All right, okay. I'm Dave Foley, and I should point out that when Tom called me up about getting together for dinner, it was in this tone of voice. "Hey, you okay?" But by the end of the dinner, it was, "We gotta fucking do something about this."
Hey, what the fuck is going on? That's what it was.
Yeah, I guess my interest in UFOs started in, I would get probably 1971, when I used to watch a TV show called UFO, made by Jerry Anderson, who you might know better from his Thunderbirds Are Go series, or later Space 1999, perhaps. But he did a lot of animation, not animation. What did they call it? It was marionation. Yeah, he was the king of marionation. He did all these shows with marionettes. But his first live-action show was something called UFO, which was set in the far future of 1983, where everything was really wild and sexy, and cars had gull-winged doors. It's never going to happen. But as you said, I was a lifelong atheist, but was interested in the UFO subject. I kind of got dragged deeper into it by a James Fox movie called Out of the Blue, which made me go, wow, this is actually really important and serious, and I should not just be interested, I should try to figure out what's going on, because it seemed like the most important thing to figure out at the time. And that got me sort of involved in the community, the UFO community, and I started meeting some people, and then I dragged a guy named Joe Rogan back into the UFO world, because he was an old friend of mine from a TV show I did. And then I wound up actually seeing a UFO with my good friend Jeremy Corbell just a few years ago. So that sort of cemented my interest in the subject, and that's enough about me. That's what you were thinking. Go on, Danny.
Well, actually, I'm Danny Sheehan. I am legal counsel for the New Paradigm Institute, which is a project that is devoted to getting disclosure of what it is that the executive branch of our government knows about the UFO phenomenon and the non-human intelligence that is deemed by them to be responsible for it. I'm the attorney for Lou Elizondo, as you know, who was the head of the top secret program in the Pentagon investigating the UFOs. I was legal counsel for Dr. John Mack at Harvard when he had the confrontation with the faculty over a book that he wrote about the subject. I was legal counsel for 20 years for Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project and for Steve Bassett's citizen hearings. And I was started out back in 1976 as special counsel to the investigation of the UFO phenomenon requested by President Jimmy Carter. So I've been at this since 1976 and been kind of the attorney that's been involved in attempting to bring this issue into the legislative realm in Congress and into judicial settings so that we can sort out what is real in the kind of three-dimensional world, what other dimensions there are of reality, and what scientific evidence there is to establish that, and what other evidence there is that is not deemed to be within the scientific, logical, positivist, materialist world that verifies the reality of this extra dimension of reality. And that we're on the brink here in the next 5 years or so of disclosing what the United States government knows about this, which is quite considerable, given the fact that they're in possession of a number of non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft and the bodies of the occupants that have been DNA tested now to be verified as non-human. And we're holding a hearing on September 9th, coming up at the House Oversight Committee, which I fly to Washington after this, and we hold those hearings to try to get Jay Stratton to come forward, who is the head of the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program, who has in fact been able to testify behind closed doors that he has been in the physical presence of one of these craft that is absolutely verified to be of non-human origin. That means it's not only not ours, but not Russian, not Chinese, not anything from this planet. And he's been in the presence of one or more of the beings. So we're going to try to get him to testify to this effect on September 9th. That's some
Hello, everyone. My name is Rizwan Virk, Riz for short. Feel free to call me that. My background is as a computer scientist. I graduated from MIT many years ago and created some enterprise startups, and then moved to Silicon Valley and was building a series of video game startups. And during my time as an entrepreneur, and then later as a venture capitalist, and now as an academic, I had sort of lived this double life, where during the day I was dealing with things like employees, finance, venture capital, administration, and in the evenings and weekends I would jet off to places like the Monroe Institute, where they try to have you experience different states of consciousness. I was experimenting with lucid dreaming, with meditation. And so for the longest time, I had been living this double life. And a few years ago, I found a way to bring my interest in consciousness, my interest in science, because I spent a lot of time with materialist academics, and my interest in technology and video games all together. I wrote a book called The Simulation Hypothesis, which is the subtitle as an MIT computer scientist shows why AI, quantum physics, and Eastern mystics all agree we're in a video game. And I found that this model of the world lets you keep a bit of the materialistic paradigm while also being able to acknowledge there might be something outside of the physical world, and we may actually be avatars or characters inside a game, and we are also players from outside of the game. And so, because of that, my work has been adjacent to the UFO topic, but I found myself getting pulled into the UFO topic again and again. And it's all Danny's fault, of course. So a few years ago, one of my hobbies is as an independent film producer. I got involved with a film called Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take, which was by a guy named Foster Gamble, who's one of the descendants of one of the founders of Procter & Gamble. And that film was more of a conspiracy film, I guess you'd call it, but there was a UFO technology element, and I had written an article about aliens, and so they had reached out to me to get involved. And so that kind of started my journey down this path. And at first I thought, okay, the UFO stuff is interesting, but all this other crazy conspiracy stuff, that can't be true. And then as time has gone on and on, I found more and more of it to be more reasonable than I had expected back then. And so, where my work overlaps with UFOs today is this idea that if we aren't in a physical reality, what does that mean for the things that have been reported, both in terms of abductions, but also in terms of craft appearing and disappearing, as well as this idea that if we are in a simulation, you can run more than one simulation, so you can have multiple timelines. And so that starts to raise this idea of, are they not just from the physical universe, but do they come from somewhere else? So anyway, that's kind of a quick overview.
I'm Mallory Everton. I'm one of the three wheels of this tricycle podcast, God's Ghost and UFOs, which is a new project. In many ways, I feel like the least qualified person to be on stage talking about this subject. Probably the thing that qualifies me the most is that my favorite movie when I was 7 was Independence Day. But on the podcast, we discuss basically having a non-materialist approach to life. I grew up very religious, and I feel like in many ways it prepared me to have more of an appreciation of the metaphysical, and also having a belief about the world and having to reshape it and change it over time, and again understand that the nature of reality will change as I change. And I think that what interests me the most in what we discuss, which is gods, ghosts, UFOs, we talk about spiritual things, supernatural things, and of course, the completely unseen, unknown world that we're trying to crack open tonight. But I'm very interested personally, and my collaborators will talk about their interests as well. I'm super interested. My background's in comedy and film, and I'm very interested in this conversation and trying to make it accessible to people. And so my beginner's mind is hopefully helpful in the discussion, always trying to maintain an open mind, understanding that this will be something that continues to be maybe impossible to get your arms all the way around, and maybe that is important and a part of it. So trying to maintain a constant state of humility and figure out how to dish this out into conversations that can be had around the dinner table, that it's not just people who are very, very deep, but that there could be some ways to have more shallow experiences. I don't like the word shallow, but to be able to dip a toe into what can feel like just a black hole that you'll never get out of. We're in this together, and I would like to be able to help people ease in.
I'm Jordan. No, seriously, the only thing you need to know about me is that I'm extremely good at identifying and taking advantage of shortcuts. So, anyway, thank you for not laughing. I really wish you'd had laughed. That would have been so much better. You can laugh later. You can. Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad. I was. I couldn't hear anything. I was laughing so hard. Mallory says she feels like the least qualified. I'm actually the least qualified. So I'll tell you why. I've never seen a UFO, which is really disappointing to me. I talk about it all the time. People tell me to stop talking about it, but I just can't. No, I also grew up religious, and I've spent my career as a media producer. I studied film for a really long time, mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I stayed in school as long as I could, and then they eventually kicked me out, and I started producing things. And a couple years ago, it came to my attention that maybe the stuff that I had always sort of sadly dismissed as being, not true or not real or not worth paying attention to was maybe really worth paying attention to. And I started going down some deep rabbit holes and finding some really interesting things, and had a harder and harder time squaring it with just all the things, So you hear stuff over here and you're like, maybe this is true. And then you hear stuff over here and you think maybe this is true. And then you hear stuff over here and you think maybe this is true. And I'm talking, of course, about gods, ghosts, and UFOs. And you get to the point where you're like, how do I square this stuff? Like, how does this, like, can these things all be true together? And the answer is yes. But we'll get there. It's a long road. Anyway, so I have just an intense passion for this topic. I helped start this podcast mainly because I wanted to talk to people I trusted about trying to find answers to questions that didn't seem to have answers. And it felt really important to me, and it still does. And I imagine it will for my whole life. And if you're going to start a podcast, it better be on a topic you're willing to talk about for the rest of your life. So that's me.
My name is Tom Maxwell. I've never really been into UFOs because they always scared the shit out of me. Terrifying things would happen to people, and that just seemed inappropriate. And when I would see pictures of, people throwing hubcaps in the sky, I thought they were very pretty. I thought it made very pretty art, but I didn't think much about it. When I was 15, I grew up on a mountain in a very small town in North Carolina. So I was isolated from the people who had self-isolated. And my dad had a shortwave radio, and I would listen to the stations and exult in the idea that there was this big, beautiful, mysterious world I could not understand. My background is in music and writing because I've always wanted to be understood, and I've always wanted to communicate. And I've always been other world adjacent. So when I was 15, we drove out, my friends and I from high school drove out to a place on the mountains to look at Black Mountain about a mile away in the fall. And I saw the Brown Mountain lights, which were so beautiful. And I think now what I saw were plasmoid entities. They're about the size of soccer balls, multicolored. They would arc like Roman candles. They would squiggle. I saw one weaving through trees. I could see its green light reflected on the bark. I watched it with binoculars. I wasn't threatened. I wasn't afraid. It was just lovely. And then, Mysteries of the Unexplained books, Time Life that my folks would have that I would devour. Charles Fort. Who's got the 40 and license plate, by the way? God bless you. Well, I can conceive of nothing in religion, science, or art that is more than the proper thing to wear for a while. And so one day, I've had experiences. I partnered up with my love of lifetimes, who's a sensitive person, and we've had these experiences. And so a lot of this for me is trying to understand, trying to communicate, and trying to find commonality. Because I do believe that this is available to all of us. These experiences are available to all of us, no matter how potentially threatening they may be to our worldview. And I guess that's it. That's why I'm doing it. And I love the conversations. I got a call from Jordan. Jordan introduced me to Mallory. We did a pilot for a show that never got picked up, and that's the way shit gets done. And I'm delighted to be here with you all. Delighted.
And what is the name of your band?
I was in a band called Squirrel Nut Zippers. I wrote the hit song Hell. I would sing it, but you can't afford me. There is a line in that song about, I said I used to think the idea was obsolete until I heard the old man stamping his feet, and now I realize it's me.
Were you in a movie called Blast from the Past?
Well, my song was.
Yeah.
Yeah, my song, I was not. I don't remember being.
I thought the band actually played in a scene from that.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Was that?
It was a big.
I hold the record of being in. Oh, were you in that movie?
I was in that movie. Yeah.
Did we meet there?
I don't think so. But I remember there was a band playing, and I think I remembered it as being Squirrel.
And we were good though, right?
Oh, it was really great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a high young man in Carborough watching fucking Kids in the Hall, pin-eyed. Yes. It was so great. But yeah, I have the distinction of being in more Brendan Fraser movies as a songwriter than any other human.
Well, go on, Noah.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to say I don't think there's such a thing as being unqualified to speak on these topics.
We'll see about that.
Well, there's no degree in ufology. There's no, it's anyone willing to tackle this topic publicly is qualified, as far as I'm concerned, because it's hard. There's still a great deal of stigma, and there's still headwinds. And I think that it's so interesting just out of the gate how diverse this panel is, which just says that an interest in this stuff is the great unifier, right? And I think very interesting that scientists and creatives are all coming together around this topic, which we'll get to. All right, we're going to just go straight into the deep end. Okay, you've died. You're at the pearly gates. To gain entry into heaven, you have to answer your best answer. What are UFOs?
Why do I always have to go first? I would have had a different answer a couple years ago, and have been in a kind of felt like a graduate school of ufology, having amazing conversations with my friend Dave and with friends of Dave and now friends of the podcast. But so it's changed. I feel like there's something much closer to us than far away from us. It feels like the proximity has taken me off guard. Mallory, like you, I feel kind of like, I thought our podcast, I could represent the bridge to folks that aren't, really have gone down every rabbit hole yet. So I still kind of internally grapple with certain topics. Do I believe that now? Is that something that I'm believing now? Is that like, but I do think there is something to this simulation idea that feels like it connects somehow, and I do feel like there is this growing sense of energy of different topics coming at us, whether it's the telepathy tapes, whether it's sort of whistleblowers, whether it's kind of ghost story, like it is feeling like things are accelerating and starting to move towards this sort of central point of proximity. And so I would answer that it feels like what we might have defined as souls, but is beginning to kind of take on a different form in my mind. And it's challenging for me because it takes away some of the romanticism of what I thought it was. Even in I'm semi-religious, I don't know, I'm like, but particularly when someone close to you passes while you're deep diving into this topic, it brings up all kinds of fascinating questions. We were just talking about before the thing, John Mack, and we were talking about the Blumenthal book about his life, which was excellent. And and this quote that was attributed to someone that had worked with John or was very close with him, may have been his wife. I'm trying to remember from the book, but he had sent a message back. At least that was the feeling. Richard didn't claim that this was going to be, he was just saying this was a story told to me, but what he said was, it's not what you think. And that was kind of intense. When I read it, and it was sort of moving, but also, it's not something that, sits perfectly well yet, but I would say that's the closest I can do to an answer.
Yeah. If he was going to go to the trouble, he could have said what it was.
I know.
Yeah. Jesus.
I know.
It's not
time
what
limit,
you think.
perhaps.
I'm going to be haunted by that. It's not what you think.
I know.
Jesus. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
When does a psychiatrist ever say anything in a straightforward way? So I guess me as a lifelong atheist, if I'm at the pearly gates, I guess my first thought would be, so UFOs, was that so I'd stop thinking you were all bullshit?
Thought experiment.
Yeah, and it's I think true. Like one of the things we talk about is like since we started doing this podcast, and for me, just since I'm getting into this, the UFO is the thing that keeps kicking the shit out of your aperture of credulity. Like it keeps telling you, like every time you think, I don't have to think that is serious, and then you go, oh, it is. You know, and it's like, for me, it was like, you know, I thought, okay, you get drawn. I think the gateway drug is machines, flying machines, alien machines, flying saucers. So you get sucked in by that. That's the hook that gets you, and it gradually you just get drawn further and further in until you realize that all the things you were certain about were it was just hubristic, and you have to, be able to be open to the notion that you're wrong about everything all the bloody time. And as a really arrogant young atheist, I would have hated me right now. So
Okay, but I'm going to press you a little further. What are UFOs?
What are UFOs?
Your absolute best guess available to you is, what are they?
The best I can do is lie to you because we're in a panel and it's what you want. Because I honestly, I don't have a clue. I don't think I've come any closer in, I would say, about the last almost 10 years of really thinking seriously about it.
Is there a list of options in your mind?
I mean, there's a list of options like where they're from that are really kind of less interesting. Whether they are extraterrestrial, whether they are ultra-terrestrial, they are from here, or they are extraterrestrial, as our friend Michael Masters calls it. And I mean, I have a preference more than an idea. What's your preference? My preference is I hope they're extraterrestrial.
Amen.
Yeah, because I want to think somehow there's somebody got here, somebody was able to do it. And that means that maybe we'll get to do it. Whereas if it's us from the future, then it feels like we're still trapped here with ourselves.
It's always such a...
And that's not exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's always the lamest option, yeah. Thank you. Danny?
Yeah. I mean, given the fact that there's 500 billion star systems just in our galaxy, and that the best estimate is that at least 20% of them have rock-hard planets in the Goldilocks zone of their respective stars, and that our planet clearly gestates life. Others have as well. So the big operative question as to whether they're extraterrestrial sentient beings just reduces itself to the Carl Sagan question. When I have conversations with Carl Sagan about this, and he said, well, they just can't get here because, of course, no material object can be accelerated faster than the speed of light because it would reach absolute mass and wouldn't be able to be accelerated. Well, it turns out that's not true. We now know from lots of experiments that have been done that we're knocking on the door right now of being able to propel objects faster than the speed of light. And I believe that after all is said and done, that while there are different phenomena that have been characterized as UFOs, I've completely rejected the national security state effort to extend it to be, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, which includes ghosts and leprechauns and Bigfoot and Skinwalker and all that.
Watch it.
That I'm just saying, I don't think that's what UFOs are. UFOs are, in my opinion, one whole category of them is a comparatively prosaic vehicle that are capable of coming from other star systems. The way they do it is extraordinarily interesting. That it has to do with consciousness, and just like directed human consciousness toward an inchoate quantum field that can actually generate a statistically significant impact on whether the inchoate quantum field manifests in the next microsecond as a wave of energy or a particle of mass, that organic sentient consciousness directed toward the kind of inchoate field of next options in the metaphysical realm has an effect upon it collapsing the wave function. And they've been able to do that because some of these other civilizations are 6 or 7 billion years older than ours, and have had time to look into these kind of things. And that they have, in my opinion, fairly well informed, they have a technology that is capable of amping up intention directed toward material objects that can cause them to be in more than one place at the same time, the double slit experiment, and that they can actually project a craft from their star system to ours, and then through the psionic assist of the technology can ramp up the intention of it manifesting in our star system. So they don't have to travel at the linear speed of light at all. It's a different mode of transport. This is what's freaking out all of the military people. They're trying to figure out how to master that. So that's what this, in my opinion, is, that these are organic beings, a whole category of them. We have a pretty good idea of the 5 major species of them: the small grays, the tall whites, the reptilians, the obviously the mantis people, the big 7-foot ones. You know, I've had hundreds of conversations with people over the 50 years now of doing this.
It was the 5th.
Pardon?
You only
Yeah.
said 4.
Pardon? And then there's this Nordic group.
The Nordics.
The problematic one that look just like human beings, appear to be Homo sapiens.
Right. There could be one here tonight. I think it's Mallory.
One or more, you know. So that I hold down a comparatively prosaic position on this. That this is the basis of the UFO phenomenon. That there's been a major ramp up in their appearances since the explosion of the nuclear weapons. That they have a genuine concern about our radiating and destroying the entire planet, and ruining their gathering of flora and fauna here on our planet for the genetic material, which they're actually bringing and potentially seeding other planetary systems in the galaxy with life. And our Earth is one of the comparatively rare planets that gestates life. And it's a fairly prosaic explanation, but it's one that's hard enough to really figure out by itself, and we will figure this out. And some people have figured it out. They're in communication with them, and there are a number of protocols that have been developed that we're trying to work out now, so that we can bring the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Oversight Committee of the House into this. We're dealing with FBI people that are helping to conduct the investigation. I'm in communication with people in the Main Justice at the Justice Department in Washington. We're all working to try to bring this into concrete reality so that we can adjust and modify the economic systems, the cultural systems, the geopolitical structures that we have. These are practical things that we need to do, and I happen to be involved in doing that. But that's what I think the UFOs are.
That's how you answer the question.
I was going to say, that's exactly what I was talking about. I don't want to believe all that. Now I do.
Well, let me take a slightly different approach, which is, first of all, UFOs are unidentified flying objects. I think we can all agree on the definition, even though now we have USOs, UAP, all these other things as well. But I guess the question for me is, can we understand what UFOs are? The only way we can understand it is through our current cultural lens and our current techno-scientific progress. And so I would start by asking a question to say, what were UFOs? So in the 1950s, if you had asked what are UFOs, they would have said, well, they're craft from Mars, Martians. And if you talk to the contactees in the 50s, like the Adamskis, they said they're from Venus. That's what they told us. Now, we know they're probably not from Mars and they're probably not from Venus. But why would they have presented that answer? Because that is an answer that somebody in the 1950s could understand, right? I mean, if you had said that 500, 1,000 years ago, they'd be like, what, are you crazy? Mars, Venus? No. So if we go back and, I want to talk a little bit about science fiction here. I know Mallory brought up Independence Day. I was a big fan of the X-Files. And I think science fiction gives us a lens through which we can imagine possible futures. But it also limits our ability to interpret that. And so I was introducing a screening of close encounters of the third kind at Arizona State University, which is where I am now. First of all, most people there had no idea about anything of UFOs, and I had to explain to them some of the true narratives of people like Jacques Vallée, Hynek, and others, who were part of Project Blue Book, and all of that, and the narrative of mass sightings. And I said, do you know what the largest mass sighting in U.S. history was, and where it was? Only 5 people out of 100 had any idea. And we're sitting in Phoenix. By the way, the answer is the Phoenix Lights, right? Now, this was a group of academics, so that may be why. But my point about a movie like Close Encounters is that it opened up the idea, and it opened people's minds to the fact that they could be extraterrestrial. But it also closed off a lot of the public's minds that there could be other options. And so the biggest objection I get is, how are you going to jump to the conclusion that these are aliens, right? And so I've written about the UFO phenomenon for sites like NBC News or CNN and others, and there was a Discovery Channel documentary on UFOs, and they wanted to get my opinion on it. And I said, well, I don't think it's either us, like the prosaic explanation. The real prosaic explanation is it's just us with our top secret technology. And I don't necessarily think it's just extraterrestrial. It doesn't rule out that some of it could be extraterrestrial. And they said, no, those are the only 2 things we can talk about. I literally had an editor at NBC News say, cut out all this other crap. Time travel, interdimensional, any of this other stuff. It's either aliens or it's us. And so in a sense, we're interpreting this because our current model of the universe, we understand that there are 20% of star systems that might have planets. So just like Superman, was able, a 10-year-old could understand Superman in the 30s because he's from another planet, and we knew enough about the universe to be able to imagine that. Just like today we know enough about the multiverse idea in science that we can start to imagine that, partly because of Hollywood, right? Because of the Marvel movies and the superhero movies with the multiverse. So we're able to imagine that. Now, if you go back a couple thousand years, there have been phenomena in the sky, and they were interpreted as angels, chariots, the wheel of fire. So you have a different religious interpretation. You had kind of a more near extraterrestrial interpretation. So my answer is, first of all, I don't know what they are. And I don't mind admitting that. But I have a feeling, as Agent Mulder said in the X-Files, they have been here a very long time, which means we have to consider some of the stories of different types of beings that have been here all along, such as the jinn in the Middle East or the fae. So some of Jacques Vallée's work is about this idea that if we look at these stories, they're similar to modern UFO narratives. And Whitley Strieber, who was mentioned earlier, told me a story about a young man who had a girlfriend who said, okay, I'm actually a gray alien, and she was pregnant, and he was unbelieving, and she transformed herself into a gray alien and said, I'm taking this baby into the other, back to the grays, and you'll never see us again. Now, the prosaic interpretation is that's just a bad breakup. She didn't want to see him anymore.
Bad drugs.
Or bad drugs, right? But you can find, I was reading the medieval Islamic literature, and you can find similar stories of the jinn, where a man married a jinn woman, they had kids, and the jinn woman said, I'm taking the kids into the jinn world, and you won't see us. So there's also this possibility that we are not the only ones here in the simulation, and that we can't necessarily see some of these other beings. So I don't rule out an extraterrestrial explanation, and I think if you look at the whole phenomenon, but I think it's being presented to us in a certain way that we can understand, given our techno-scientific development and our techno-scientific narratives to date.
Thank you.
Riz, you were really singing my heart song. I really can only, I can really only just build on that a little bit, because I think if I died right now, and right now a lot of things are not in concrete reality or consensus reality at the moment, I would definitely say I have no idea what UFOs are. But there's this guy named Peter Crone that I follow on Instagram. He says this thing sometimes that he says, life will continue to present you with circumstances to show you where you're not free. And so building on what you were just saying about about kind of how we're being like shown certain things, and I would say I think that UFOs are continuing to show us where we're not free as a people, like what we don't understand, and kind of asking us to be open, to learn to communicate. Like, can we get on the same page about what this is? No, like it continues to bump and like cause conflict and tension, and there's division, and separateness is an illusion. So I'm tending to believe that there's still more for us to learn. So I would say it's just showing us a big hole that we're continuing to try and get a bigger flashlight for.
I would probably use my very special ability to find shortcuts and say D, all of the above. I actually I identify as a maximalist on this topic. And this is pretty much just like Dave. Like this is what I want. I want there to be aliens from other planets visiting here, because that's just objectively cool. And I want also there to be some dudes from the future who are like, hey, don't blow up your planet yet. It's not time. And I would also love there to be angels and demons, and I would love there to be ghosts, and I would love there to be plasmoids. And I am just a little suspicious that there are all of them, because the thing is that and this is sort of a vibe that we seek adamantly to cultivate on our show, is to default believe people. And that doesn't mean that you become so credulous that you're sort of a sap and you'll just like, whatever they say must be right, but rather just to give people the benefit of the doubt until there is reason not to, right? So if somebody comes up to you and they tell you a story, there's nothing in it for you to start off by disbelieving them. And I think way too much that's what we do. And so if you come from a position of default belief and you wait until evidence comes out, or it becomes clear that they were lying to you for some reason, you can cut away those sort of untrue stories, and the obviously untrue stories, the ones that sort of have given you reason to stop believing. And what you're left with is just an unimaginable mountain of stories and experiences and people who have said things across the entire spectrum. And there is really not one interpretation of this phenomenon that does not have the support of an immense catalog of experiencers who have no reason to lie. And so I could not identify one thing. And I think it's great that we call them UFOs, because it is a catch-all term. It's like, well, we don't know. I don't know because I haven't seen one. Like I said earlier, someone please fix that for me. Just, you can talk to me after. So if I was talking to someone at the pearly gates, I'd say probably you're a UFO.
Every answer has mentioned things like identity and consciousness and states of knowledge and separation. And I want to tell you that I am standing at the pearly gates. I am sitting at the pearly gates. Because I think that in order to talk about this kind of phenomenon, we must first talk about our aspect to it. We have been conditioned to believe that we are individuated meatbags, separate one from the other. But just as your eye cannot see your eye, and just as you cannot bite your own teeth, we cannot know our true identity. Our identity is a transient reflection of those who are around us, what their opinions of us are, the types of things that we're attracted to, or reactions to things that we are not attracted to. It is entirely ephemeral. The idea that our personalities will survive after death and persist and walk streets made of gold seems adorably antiquated right now. So there's a couple of things that I think, there are a couple of sort of conceptual hurdles that we would need to get over in order to even understand this thing at all. Namely, identity and separation. The idea that we are individuated meatbags and the idea that we are separate from. We are regarding the UFO. We are studying the UFO. We are considering and contemplating the UFO experience. I think about Heraclitus, who said, "We step and do not step into the same rivers. We are and we are not." There is nothing about us that isn't transient, that isn't on some spectrum of expression or ability, that isn't in some way passing away. It is not the real thing. And I think about the Chandogya Upanishads and the Vedanta school, where the master is having a dialogue with the student about the relationship between Brahman and Atman, that is to say, the all, the source, the whole thing, God, and the self. The Brahman is not, and this, I'm not preaching. I am preaching.
You're preaching.
The Brahman is not that which is mutable. It is not, it has always been, it will always be, it is, right? And in that passage, the master says, the most subtlest part of this is self, which I took to mean consciousness. Self is the most sublime aspect of Brahman. Everything else are expressions. Everything that we see around us, UFOs, Dave Foley, wood floors, are name and form. They're not, they pass away. They're simply name and form. They're just attributes. They're just a series of attributes. So the greatest lesson of the Vedanta is when you think or contemplate about self, anatta, and Brahman, thou art that. You are Brahman. So you're not separate from UFOs. You're not separate from Jesus, you know. You're not separate from each other. The final actual reality of us is that we are that. Thou art that. And so when we contemplate UFOs, we should not do it from a distance or one of like above and below or some sort of hierarchy of understanding. They are in this context and in that sense, they are us. I'm not saying human beings or anything like that. I am saying expressions of the same self, I am, that we are as well.
Preach!